All right, welcome to Anatomy and Physiology lesson 10.01, Divisions of the Nervous System. This is the first lesson in the chapter over nervous system tissue. And we're going to cover things like how we categorize the nervous system, what's the anatomy of a neuron like, and we're going to culminate with how does a nerve impulse get transmitted down a neuron. A neuron is the name for a nerve or a cell in the nervous system. But in this one, we're starting off with the divisions. So kind of like we divided the skeleton into the axial and the appendicular, and we would divide muscles into categories, we divide the nervous system into categories. So our two main divisions, and I'm going to kind of keep these color-coded, we're going to divide into the central nervous system, and the peripheral nervous system. So these are the two largest divisions. So central is kind of, it kind of makes sense in the center, and peripheral, if something's on your periphery, it's to the outside. So the central nervous system is made up of the brain, and the spinal cord. And quite obviously, that's central to the body. The peripheral is made up of the sensory neurons. So the neurons that allow us to gather information about our environment, optic nerve, the olfactory bulbs, our touch receptors in our skin. And then this goes to nerves that run into the spine. We'll talk about this again later. So we go into the central nervous system, and then coming back out, we also have a set of what are called cranial nerves that go directly into the brain. And in order to operate our periphery, our arms, our legs, our head, we have motor neurons. And this should be familiar to you because we talked about motor neurons back in the chapter on muscles. And we said motor neurons are what let us move. This is a little blurry. I'm going to see if I can focus. Okay, not really. So we have, let's start down here, and we're going to start with these sensory organs and neurons. So I'll do light blue. So these are our sight, our smell, our taste, our touch. So we have things here like touch receptors, touch neurons. And back when we did integumentary, you guys did a lab and you found out you had more sensory neurons in your fingertips than you do on your forehead. This is things like the olfactory bulbs that let us smell. The optic nerve. So we have something that comes into our system through these sensory neurons. And everything that lies in this category is part of the afferent division. Afferent comes from affect. If you affect something, it causes a change. So an effect can be thought of as a cause. So this, so your receptors, your pressure receptors, run into nerves that go into the spinal cord. So we have an incoming signal, and it goes in through your sensory neurons into the spinal nerves, and then it goes into the brain, up the spinal cord to the brain, and your brain interprets what's going on. And then your brain says, well, it's not a problem. You can keep doing what you're doing. Or maybe your brain says that it's appropriate. You've got to do something. So for example, let's see if we had our auditory neurons, we'd hear something. So if there's a fly buzzing in our ear, that's what we're sensing. That goes in through the sensory neurons. And then we go from the peripheral nervous system into the central. So we're going to the spinal cord and up the brain. And the brain says, you know what, we need to get rid of that fly. So it sends the signal back down the spinal cord out through the spinal nerves. And so maybe it'll go out the spinal nerve that's close to my T5 vertebra and down the nerves that are into my arm. So it'll go down some motor neurons. Well, now we're into the efferent division. And so here we're talking about an effect, E-F-F-E-C-T. An effect you can think of as result, R-E-S-U-L-T. So here's where things get a little more interesting. We have two kinds of effects that we can have. We can have a somatic or we can have an autonomic. And if you think about autonomic, doesn't that kind of sound like automatic? So sounds like automatic. Automatic. These are responses that are involuntary. So this is an involuntary response. You can't help it. Somatic is voluntary. So we're talking about using things like skeletal muscle. So with my ear, let's go back through this. I hear the fly, the signal goes through my spinal nerves. Then we go from peripheral to nervous into the spinal cord brain. And I decide, my brain says, swat the fly. So I'm now in my efferent. And this, I could decide to swat the fly or not. So I'm going to exercise my somatic system. I'm going to contract some skeletal muscles and I'm going to try to get that fly away. Well, let's say that another one, you're on stage and you forget your lines. By the way, this is off of Schoolhouse Rock. So if you want to watch the Schoolhouse Rock video, kind of fun. So you have an awareness that, and we don't necessarily have a sense here. We're kind of more, actually, we're kind of originating in the central nervous system because we're thinking and we can't remember something, but we still have an efferent response. So your brain sends a signal out through your nerves. And this one, we're going to hit the autonomic. And your heart rate's going to go up, your face is going to blush, you're going to have an embarrassment response. And you have no control over that. So because you don't have control of that, we're autonomic. And we have two divisions of autonomic. We have sympathetic. And we have parasympathetic. So the sympathetic system speeds up your involuntary, speeds up body processes. So anytime should be a process. So that says process. Anytime you're in a situation and your heart races and your blood flow increases, you're having a sympathetic response. So parasympathetic slows down body responses. So an example here would be you're starting to fall asleep and you start to get drowsy and your heart rate starts to slow, your pulse starts to slow. That's parasympathetic. And that's involuntary. You really can't control that. I mean, you can help try to mentally relax yourself, but you really don't have a lot of control. So one of the things you'll want to be able to do, how are you going to apply this? If we talk about a given situation, and we're always usually coming in with something sensory and going up and translating, but as you come down from the brain and you think about what's happening, is it an autonomic response or a somatic response? And then if it's autonomic, is it parasympathetic or sympathetic? So make sure you understand the difference. And if you were given a scenario, can you explain what division of the nervous system is being applied? So closing remark, these cranial nerves, these control most of what goes on in your face and the scalp and the head. And these come directly out of the brain. So for example, if you want to smile, it's the nerves that come out of your brain in through the head and the face that allow you to do that. And if you're having a stroke, they will, if someone thinks you're having a stroke, they'll ask you to do a series of tests. So they'll say smile. And if you can only smile with one half of your mouth, they'll know, oh, okay, there's a cranial nerve involved. Or they'll say, see if you can say a certain word, because the lips and the mouth are controlled by cranial nerves. And that's really all we're going to say about the cranial nerves in some classes. And if you take a collegiate class, you'll spend time going over those cranial nerves and learning what they are. But for us, it's just enough for now to mention them. All right, that's all. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.